Is Reactjs still relevant in 2024?
The React documentation itself says that if you want to get started with a new React project, you start with Nextjs. This statement was mistaken by many people.
What is it something that you look out for individuals whenever you hire for front-end devs?
My implicit expectation is that the person knows Reactjs very well. You don't start learning about words and sentences without learning about alphabets. Similarly,
Right.
you don't jump into Nextjs without learning React. You will fall on your face. As a interviewee, we talk about our project. We have the higher chances to crack that in. Only thing that is going to get you is like the hands-on. You face the trouble. You get into that kind of irritation mode, man. Why this error is not getting solved? Do I need to learn data structure to master React? The answer of this question is
If someone would know the things that we have talked about in the podcast, their chances to get a job as a front end developer would increase by 10 times in 2024. So it is that important. Today's guest is Tapas Adhikary, who has been in the web development industry for over 18 years and has been an early adopter of Reactjs. He is a contributing author with FreeCodeCamp, a technical writer with Hashnode, has an open source platform called React Play, and is also running his own startup called Creovis Technologies. He has taken a lot of interviews in the past, be it for others or for his own company, and has been engaged and analyzing the web development industry for such a long time. This podcast is for all the beginners whom we don't want to get misleaded with the information they hear from people or see on the internet, but rather take an informed decision. We have touched upon several questions that any beginner web developer would have, be it is Reactjs still something they should learn or not, how much React is required to crack a job, what do companies actually look for individuals while hiring for web developer, mistakes that any beginner shouldn't make, and much more. So let's get started.
One of the questions that most of the developers, web developers out there has is Reactjs still relevant in 2024?
how I see it basically. When I was a mid-level or a junior developer, I had my reason to go for Reactjs. And since then, Reactjs has only improved. Is only improved in terms of its features, in terms of whatever it can actually provide, and whether good or bad, there are a lot of developers who started adapting it. On the web development side, there are a lot of application at the production level running on React.js because it was trusted and has built, giving a lot of attention. And it is not like that there is any such panic that we have to migrate from React to something completely in a different ecosystem. Now, there are certain discussions since Nextjs in picture, and Nextjs again, pushing it hard from all the corner. But one thing need to remember, especially for the beginners, if they're listening to me, is like you don't really start learning about words and sentences without learning about alphabets. Similarly,
Right.
you don't jump into Nextjs without learning React. You will fall on your face. So I don't think that that's the approach that somebody should take. That I'm going into Nextjs, I'm learning like how to do layout, I'm learning how to do pages, routing, and all these things. But I don't know the fundamental concept of context API. I don't know like why in Nextjs certain state management may not be relevant. Where certain state management, what is the design pattern of React ecosystem? What are the anti patterns? If I don't know these basics, that means even Nextjs, such a golden tool, is in my hands. I'm only going to abuse it. And at the end of it, what I'm going to say is like, man, I'm so frustrated. This particular framework is not good. I'll be searching for something else. So
Right.
people who were in the React ecosystem, I think they're still continuing to be in React ecosystem. Of course, for their project or for their client, if they have to work on Angular, Slate, Vue, or anything else, as I told, need basis they would have learned, but they keep referring it. And there are a lot of people. In fact, the React documentation itself says that if you want to get started with a new React project, you start with Nextjs. I think this statement was mistaken by many people. They thought that, okay, we don't have to learn React.js. It means that just like how we used to use create React app to start a React project, now onwards it's just Nextjs. We'll go there and get started. But one thing probably people forgot is like the foundation is still React.js. You have to learn all the things about React.js to be very successful with Nextjs, project and the foundation. So I don't think React.js, to read your subject again, React.js is dead. It's rather is rather to be consumed by people from a different angle. If I may add to it, React being a UI library, right? We all know user interface library, and it does its job superbly. It's a UI library. His job is to you write components, you do component composition, you know how to pass data between the component, and your UI is ready. Outside of that
Mhm.
ecosystem, React never promises to do anything. Neither it promises to do
Right.
routing, nor it
Routing too.
promises to do anything else. For that, the ecosystem, the community came together and did it. Now you have a package
Hmm.
Nextjs where you are getting everything. Like you're getting routing, you're getting the best way of doing the data passing and all sort of things. But you need to understand, like, to make all these things really operational and production ready, you
Hmm.
need to know React's core concept. You cannot go further without it.
And also, we know that Next.js is built on top of React. So, if it's something on top of React, that means the basics of React would anyway be required, right? And I think this confusion or this sort of thinking that whether React.js is still good or whether we should directly go for Next.js or not, the primary reason behind it is, I think, the job aspect of things, because people are looking out for jobs, and if they are seeing in the job description that a company requires Next.js, and if they're not explicitly mentioning React.js, so being a beginner, if I'm not really sure how the whole scenario looks like, I would think that I should start learning Next.js and really don't bother about React.js, right? So, how does the companies take React.js in this current year, say in 2024? How do you think? Because you opened up a company and you have been hiring folks. What is it something that you look out for individuals whenever you hire for, say, specifically front end devs?
Okay, yeah. So I just put it out on LinkedIn some time back, and the hiring says there's a junior front end developer. And if you look into the JD, it clearly says the foundational knowledge of JavaScript, foundational knowledge of React.js. You should know some amount of Tailwind CSS or something equivalent. Optional, you should know Next.js. We use Next.js and TypeScript for most of our project. Okay. So,
Mm-hmm.
but still, for when we went with the JD, we emphasized on JavaScript and React because those are the foundational thing. And I believe if somebody, if they know JavaScript and React, and if they have worked on the React and its peripheral, actually getting on Nextjs and learning would be kind of cakewalk, and we can give the required training and all those things to get the person get going. But if I
Mm-hmm.
am actually looking out to say giving a JD, I think that also not wrong. That I'm saying that I want to hire somebody who knows Nextjs. My expectation, my implicit expectation is that the person knows React.js very well, because when the person is
Mm-hmm.
coming for an interview, I am going to ask most of the questions that are relevant to React.js. I'm going to ask the fundamentals. I'm going to ask most of the fundamentals of JavaScript. And then probably I want to
Right.
know, like, what are the things on Next.js the person knows. Okay, fine. With React.js, how you used to handle routing with React Router and all these things. Next.js made it easy, but do you know how it works internally? Right? And then say, how
Right.
Nextjs manages the cache. What kind of problem you had with your React application with the cache management before when Nextjs was not there? I will be asking
Hmm.
like this to know that
Yeah.
when there is a real problem comes, framework gives us everything. But we all
Right.
know, like with a little bit of experience, that there is beyond framework is human intelligence. The
True.
exact that point of time when the issue comes, what kind of debugging mindset we have, how do we fix the issue, what is our fundamental knowledge, those are the things come into picture, right? So
Hmm.
if we don't know like how certain things works internally, or what kind of improvement that Nextjs has got over React.js, we will be like just using it as another tool. We won't, when the
True.
situation arises, we won't be able to put our brain and won't be able to judge like, okay, this is why certain things are happening, and this is how
Hmm.
we need to fix.
Before.
Even people are
True.
recruiting saying Next.js, they will be actually looking for things like this. It's not just surface level, not just scratching the surface.
Yeah, because I think the major realization that you will have that you need to learn React.js is when you will start working on projects. Until and unless you are not building projects, if you are just learning from YouTube, hopping from one video or the other, this realization won't be there, and you will always have that question that should I go for React.js or Next.js? But
Yeah.
once you start building on the project, you will have a clear idea. I think then only people would be able to relate to our podcast also, that how important is it to learn the foundational thing and then moving on to, say, a framework or something else,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. I think see, the thing is like how to learn is also very crucial, right? People who are just getting started with their career, they want to go by what somebody else is saying, because of course they don't have much of knowledge. So they have to follow someone. People in the mid level, if they are already confused, they are the confused soul in the mid level. So they have come across some way, and now they're guessing whether I have wasted my entire career so far, or how am I going to give it a shape from now onwards. People who are in the
Right.
experience level, they have already burned their finger. They're like, Mahatma and gurus. They know, like, okay, I have been through it. Now I know my way, like how to I can kind of get
Yeah.
into the path. So this beginner and the mid folks, they have to really know like
Mhm.
how to learn and how to unlearn. So, certain things. You pointed out really well things as reading the tutorials after tutorials, watching playlist after playlist is not going to take anybody anywhere. Only thing the person is
Mhm.
going to get is like after 2 days, I have wasted my time. And only thing that is going to get you is like the hands on. You face the
Right.
trouble. You get into that kind of irritation mode, man. Why this error is not getting solved? You don't take bath, you don't eat, you scratch your head. That's what is going to make you learn.
Right.
That's
Right.
what will make you go to deep, go to fundamentals, and make the things work.
Yes, exactly. I think if you face any problem, then ChatGPT also will give up at some point in time, and there your knowledge of building stuff is really gonna help. So I think we have talked a lot about how React.js is still relevant in the industry and why people should learn it, even if they are thinking to move in the direction of Next.js. Now, I also wanted to talk about how to start with React.js. So, what are
Mm.
some of the fundamental topics that a person needs to know before even starting learning React.js? We'll move on to Next.js later, but person is a complete beginner. They would have heard that they need to know JavaScript, but how much? They need to
Mm.
know something else, but what all things are there? So,
Mm.
can you please throw some light on that?
Yeah, sure. So, first thing would be is like whenever you are starting your journey, the first thing to remember is like the journey takes time, and the time taken is completely depend on the individual. So, if my friend has learned React.js in 1 month, surprisingly, I should not expect that same 1 month I'll take to learn. For me, the learning path will be little bit different, and time will be different. So that's the first thing. That's the initial zero thing that to keep in mind. And then we need to start with JavaScript. Of course, the basic of programming. I would say before even going to JavaScript, there are certain things which are like basic of programming. They're available across all the programming language. For example, logical operators, conditions, loops. These are not part of
Hmm.
JavaScript alone. They are available everywhere. So conceptually, the programming thinking is something that we need to adopt. I'm talking about somebody who is like very basic, just getting started, right?
Yeah.
Then you need to get started with understanding JavaScript, because there are few things in JavaScript which is way different than any other programming language exist, right? For example, how this function works, how does arrow function works, what is the
Yeah.
this keyword for the arrow function. There are a few basic things. Then the operations along objects and arrays. I think these are the two very fundamental things that you need to know before you jump into not only React.js, anything that has to do with UI. Why? Because people often say, and then this is again frequently asked question to me, do I need to learn data structure to master React? The answer of this question is like, you have to learn data structure for doing anything in your life. So
Anything. True.
without data, you will build a page which is blank. So if there is a data, you have to structure the data in some way to show it in the UI. So you need data structure. Now you show the
Right.
data, you have to do certain kind of computation like searching, filtering, and all these things. So you need algorithm. So data structure algorithm
Hmm.
is inherent. So you have to do data structure algorithm. Now for React.js purposes, this data structure will be 90% cases will be around objects and arrays. We have
Hmm.
seen that. Seldom we use somewhere map, somewhere set, and things like that. But mostly objects and arrays. There also have the fundamental concepts like what is mutability, what is immutability, how references work, why you have to clone an object, what is cloning means, what is deep cloning means, object and array. You
Hmm.
don't have to really remember all the methods of array. Nobody remembers. Whenever you need,
Hmm.
Google and try to figure out like what exactly it is. But implicit, what is fundamental? Fundamental is like I do three dot 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 and do something with the object, and why am I doing it? I don't know. Just copying and pasting and something is happening magically. No, it's not like that. Why we are cloning it, why we are cloning it, why we are doing it. So all these things you need to know basically. And
Hmm.
once we have at least this level of knowledge, I would say that have some knowledge about Git, and GitHub, because any programming that you want to get started with, these are Git and GitHub would be like very basic, because without that you won't be able to progress and make your work outside to the outside world.
True.
So that's what you need to learn. And once you done with this, I think this is the time that should start learning React.js fundamental concepts. So the fundamental concept that React.js you can start with is like first understanding components, like what exactly component in plain English, like real life world, like
Yeah.
what, why there is something big, and we take a hammer, knock it, and create small components. Like what is the use of it? Then once you have the component, then you need to understand like what is the component structure, how data pass from one component to another component, understand the concept of state, like components private data, once one component talk to another component, how they pass things with props. Apart from props, what are the other methodology through which component can talk to each other, can pass
Hmm.
data to each other. And then once you have this clarity, then you should think about how can I use composition, which is again a programming fundamentals, nothing to do with JavaScript and React, right? How can we just do composition so that we can compose the components to each other, so that we can take leverage it and write a lot of less code and do data passing much better way. And then finally the
Mm,
regular stuff, because you have to make your application responsive, so event handling is one of the things that you need to learn.
true.
And while learning all these things, in each step you need to build application. So if you're learning about
Exactly.
components, if you're learning about, I mean, don't wait. This is the problem. So don't wait till you learn event to build a to-do app. That doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. You learn about components. You build an app which is having a header, a navigation bar, some page, and having a footer. So you have two, three, four components. Then
Hmm.
once you learn the state and props, then you see like which data I can keep private into each component and which data can pass from one to another. So you give some
Right.
life to that part, same application, and do this stuff, right? So like that, you can take actually one app, and incrementally as you learn, you can actually keep building on top of it, right? And kind of make it better. And then after the events and all these things gets over, we learn about the reusability where the hooks comes into picture, and then we
Yeah.
learn about better state management, the redux concept of redux and all the stuff. Then we should go for understanding how the server components work, what is the relationship between the server components and client components, how do they differ, because ultimately a React developer today's date should take a natural progression towards Nextjs or some other equivalent framework, because it's
Hmm.
a guide. I take it as a guidance from React community itself. Like they're saying that you go for a framework because you really don't have to rely on many other third-party tools that you are using. If you need routing, you're
Yeah.
using something else. So ultimately, your natural progression is could be Next.js today. Tomorrow it could be another JS. Doesn't matter if it is React based. But if you know this progression, if you know this fundamental path of use, then I think the next thing would be like you start with Next.js and kind of get started with it. I actually created one React roadmap and published on FreeCodeCamp. Though I had
Okay.
created in early 2023, but I think that roadmap will be relevant for at least another 2 years to come. So,
Hmm.
anybody can look into it. It may be
Yeah, I think
useful
we
to
can
them.
give reference to that. Yep, and I think the fact that you highlighted that building project is really something that you need to do at every step, because uh, then only you will realize the importance of something. For example, I am someone, say I created a React application that is a single page application. Now, I have seen other applications, and I have seen that when you can hop onto other pages as well. So now
Mm,
that inquisitiveness would come to your mind, that how has something been done. So now you would search on, say it was on Google, that how I can achieve this thing. Then you would realize, okay, there is a concept called as routing that you need to do.
right.
And similarly, when you build project, you would learn about how you need to cache some data so that you can fetch it, things like that. So building project is something that has helped me personally, and as you have highlighted too, I think it would have helped you in your journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the project building also, sometime one mistake that we do is like we try to search for a lot of references, especially for beginners. What they do is like
Mhm.
even if it's a simple to-do app, I think instead of they're trying to break their head, they would like to search on Google or ask ChatGPT, like, get me to do app, and I would use that as a reference to build mine. I think that's a wrong approach,
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
either you will be very overwhelmed seeing somebody else code because you are just a beginner, and second thing it could be is like, you may not understand or may not require at that point of time all the things happening in that particular project. So rather, as you are learning, like you learn about creating functional component, you create a functional
Hmm.
component just as a header. That's your job. Your job is done.
Yeah.
Next, you understand about the component and the state. So it means that within the header, what kind of private data you can create and make that header much more beautiful as its JSX. Then you learn
Hmm.
about how component can work with each other. Then you already have a header, you created a footer, and you have a component, content area. Inside content area, you have two more component and make them talk to each other, passing props. So this is how you build. And I think the developer who is actually following this path, they have the immense opportunity to even create content along with building, because they are
True.
learning stuff completely on their own way, and everything that they're learning, if they kind of note down, it become a content for the next generation to even follow. So that, I feel, somewhat is a proper way for beginners to kind of learn stuff.
Yeah, and I think tools like ChatGPT can rather be used to take reference on what type of project you can build
Yes,
on the
yes.
concept that you have.
Exactly. I mean, once you build it, then you can probably compare with a lot of references and see like, how people have done better than you, or you have done better than them. That's perfectly
Hmm.
fine, and that somebody can be ChatGPT also. No worries. But I completely buy in your idea, like what kind of projects should we build? Because I was actually doing, like, I was searching in ChatGPT, like there is one project I want to build where I want to use context API, and in that I want to use reducer. I also want to use hook, and I want to use some kind of memoization with, use callback or use memo. Can you give me some project idea with that? To some extent, 60% it give it right, and then 40% I had to build on top of it, like a project like that.
Now, moving on, like now we know that what would be the roadmap to learn React. Now, let's say if a person wants to move on to Next.js and he or she is still a complete beginner. Now, one sort of question that can come to an individual is, how much time should I give to React in order to move to Next.js? Should I first completely give a good amount of time for React.js and then moving on to Next.js would be easier for me? Or I have heard someone saying that uh, just learn the very basics of React and then you can move on to Next.js. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so there are two scenarios. One scenario could be your manager holding the gun on your hair and saying that, hey, there's an Next.js project, you have to fix a bug. You don't have much way. Whatever you can do, God bless you, and you can actually do that for that particular instance. But the second case, where you want to build career with it, in that case, I think you should give time to React.js enough. And by that, I mean that just go to react.dev. Don't have to really touch any other references to get started with. The React.dev has made things so simple and so synchronous that you can just follow it and start picking up the core concept of React very well. The core concept of React is actually very easy. It's not that much and that difficult. It's just whatever it will: component, state, props, passing component, context, state management, event handling. Enough. If you have this with you, like, if like how to make calls, how to get the things, how to do the immutability stuff, how to manage the state, and how to pass that things, to my other component. If you know this much very well, I
Hmm.
think you are in very good state to start with anything React based. It's not only Next.js, anything that is
Okay.
React based, right? So now, if as we are talking about Next.js, I think that naturally then you have to know next thing is about the React server components, what we are saying again and again. Because if you go to Next.js documentation, it's very clearly written that it's heavily built on server components. So you should know server
Okay.
components very well. And once you know server components very well, I think the Next.js would be just following the documentation, again doing the project and getting other stuff. So, but to answer your question, really give some time to React.js. And how much time, it depends on probably your own capability, like who is learning. But if I
Hmm.
have to do it, I would probably dedicate myself completely to React.js for a good amount of time before even I start looking into anything of Next.js.
Okay, got it. And if we move on our conversation to more of the interview side of things, So, what are some of the things, if, for example, you have written in your JD that a person should know the basics of React.js and Next.js is optional. So, what are some of the things that you see in an individual while interviewing for front-end developer? What are some of the things that they need to know? Is it just the projects that you see, or is it the technical knowledge also that you check? What are some of the I would ask some common questions that you ask to individuals. I hope you have hired the individual
No,
specifically for these
I have the interviews lined up. It depends when you are releasing this podcast. I have
Okay.
interviews lined up this week, but the fundamental, not the theoretical discussions. I kind of believe in project building and all this stuff. What I do is basically I give a project for them to build, and I ask them like go as wild as possible with your own creativity, whatever the ways you want to do the code. Do the code. I also give the screen. Just my only one condition: it has to be pixel perfect, because whatever screen I'm giving, you have to build the exact same thing, because when you come in, you have to do the same work. So I want to know how much close you go. Now, once the person build it, my discussion goes on the code that they have written, not that what I am coming up with. So I go to each corner of that code and try to understand why they have done this way. And then I also want to know, like, what was there any other alternatives that they had considered while developing it? And if there are alternatives, why they have not taken it, or if there are alternatives that they're thinking now, why they didn't think at that point of time. So with that, I want to try to figure out is like it could be like the person may not know at all the certain good way or the standard practice, or with a smaller
Mhm.
hint the person can get and kind of come up with a stuff that they
Right.
want to work in. So that's the way that I proceed. Now while doing that, if I'm giving somebody to build something on React, exactly that's what I did for this opening. We given them to build something, add to cart, remove from cart, simple stuff. So
Okay.
my thing would be to understand, like, probably if they have used context API, why they use context API. Without context API, was there any way to kind of do it? And then it's also different, like, how you define your provider, how you define your, context. What is the design pattern that you have adopted? With that code, I'll understand. Now, why you have
Hmm.
not gone for that particular design pattern? Why you have gone for this particular design pattern? Right? So within the
Right.
context data, whatever the data you are seeking for, or you're updating a context, where exactly you are doing? You're doing it outside provider or inside provider? So there are various
Hmm.
kind of discussions that you can bring in, just a small use case that I'm talking about, right? Then that can go to any level. And when you are in an interview, I guess the more time as a interviewee we talk about our project, we have the higher chances to
Okay.
crack that interview. That is
Hmm.
proportional. The more the
Okay.
interviewer speak, you have the least chances of cracking the interview. So the person who is coming with their project, they have to make sure that they are talking enough about the project, all the stuff, and that's what I also expect, right? And definitely while doing that, I want to understand how they have broken down the components. Is it like too much broken,
Ah.
or is it like adequately
Hmm.
broken? The data passing is happening. Is it like too much props drilling happening, or they have adequately thought about some other approaches? I sometimes ask bluntly, like, why they have not used Redux, right?
Yeah.
Then, or why they have reused Redux. For the project like this, I explained there is no need of Redux, but I've seen people use Redux. So
Hmm.
I'll ask them like
Yeah.
why they have used Redux in this case, why they are thought of doing it, right? So these things is what is going to give me a lot of insight, like how an individual think and what is the gap the individual has with the right way of coding versus what they have coded, and that also
Hmm.
gives me like how much effort I need to put when I'm hiring this person in. I am not
Right.
100% correct, so I don't expect anybody else to be 100% correct, but they should be there so
Hmm.
that they can come in, I give them certain stuff, and they can independently learn and start executing on it. As long as that is there, they are hired.
Okay. Yeah, I think this conversation gave me personally a lot of insight to how to answer to people who ask these sort of questions. But it would be really insightful for the audience as well, who are beginner web developers and they are really looking out to ultimately get a job with whatever knowledge they have and what are some of the things that they need to learn. So I think by the end of this podcast, they would understand that yes, React.js is still relevant, and why and how we have already talked about that. So it was really nice conversation, Tapas. So thank you so much for giving out time for this one.
My pleasure.